Hey everyone, I'm Ramon Mejia. Welcome to another episode of the LitRPG podcast, episode number 164 of the show. We got 6 new reviews for you folks at home. Before we begin, I want to, of course, give a quick shout out to our newest supporters for the podcast. These folks help keep the podcast free of ads, free to everybody to listen to and watch on a weekly basis. Christian Thomas and S Selcouth. I might be saying that wrong, but thank you anyways for your support, for you folks. And of course, thank you to all the Patreon supporters of the podcast who help again keep this thing going, and everybody who helps support us in so many other ways, like clicking on the links that we have that send us pennies to help pay for the cost of running this fancy gig, and just everybody who shares and likes the podcast. That really does help get the word out. So thank you everybody for all your tremendous support. But on to the show. We are going to be reviewing 6 new books this week. That includes The Final Trial, Level Up book number 3. Just to let you know, not the final book in the series. It's a little misnomer with the title there. But after that, it'll be also The Lost Portals, the Czarzakian Multiverse Online, LitRPG Omniverse book number 1, Czarzakian Multiverse Online, LitRPG Omniverse. Long title. I think it's done on purpose though. After that will be Gun and Blade, Crystal Shards Online book number 4. Then it'll be Bone Dungeon, Elemental Dungeon number 1. Then it's going to be Soulcatcher, LitRPG Series Universe ICS book number 1. And then it'll be Greyblood, Adventurer Academy, a LitRPG series. So those are the reviews coming up. Before we go into that though, we are going to start off with LitRPG news. And in LitRPG news, we're going to start off with a quick congratulations to Michael Chatfield for his amazing launch of the 4th Realm this week. This last week, rather, it broke through the top 100 on all of Amazon for a number of days, actually. And I think it hit about 86 or even better. It might have at one point. But it just goes to show how well a LitRPG novel can do, even if it's not on Kindle. That's right, this novel isn't even on Kindle Unlimited, and it's still got that great stuff. And I mean, that's extra special, I'll be honest with you, just because Kindle Unlimited provides a lot of free-ish opportunities for people to read it, so that tends to boost up numbers and sales. But this one did it without it, and that just shows how big of a fan base that Michael Chatfield has and how good the novels are, of course. So, congrats, buddy. Speaking of Michael Chatfield, he also did a live Facebook live stream earlier this week. He took questions from fans and made some announcements, so definitely go check that out on Facebook. We have a link in the show notes for you to watch it if you want to. Also, he fully claimed responsibility for the spelling errors in the latest book, the 4th Realm series, the one we just talked about. He said it was a part of him writing changes right before release, and he said, it's on me, not on the editors, not on the beta readers. I wasn't satisfied with some scenes, and so some extra errors slipped out, but they're making up for it. They are putting out a revised version that you can upload for free, of course, if you've already purchased it. Michael also announced that he'll be putting books 1 through 3 of the 10 Realm series on the Kindle Unlimited program for 90 days, starting April 1st. So he's doing this to help out fans that have been begging him to put his stuff on Kindle Unlimited so they can afford to read it. He also goes into it explaining why he's not on the Kindle Unlimited program anymore, like a lot of literature authors are. So you can hear him talk about his reasoning. This is something that we talked about on the show several months ago, including myself, while a lot of authors decided to leave Kindle Unlimited rather than risk a arbitrary Amazon ban or just like them taking away Kindle Unlimited reads. But again, he goes into it himself, so you can listen and talk about it. Just letting you know, again, on April 1st, starting there, you can get the first 3 books of the 10 Realm series, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Realms, of course, on the Kindle Unlimited program. So if you're a fan of that series, or if you've never had a chance to read it, this will be your chance. But again, it's only going to be there for 90 days. So once April 1st hits, go get them. Go get them all. Okay. In other news, we have a couple of deals from some authors that we heard about. RJ Treveria wrote to the podcast at feedback@geekbystpodcast.com, just basically letting us know that his first book in his series, The Log and Accepted, is going to be free for 4 days on a 4-day weekend. So putting it in the news section so you guys can get some free books. So this is a book called, again, Log and Accepted by R.D. Treveria. It'll be free this upcoming weekend. Also, Matthew Kent's The Apprentice of Arabella is also going to be free this weekend. Actually, it'll be free specifically on Friday and Saturday, which will be the March 29th and the 30th of this month. And he's doing that to promote his new book. The second book is also out right now. The first book is free for you guys, so you can catch up if you really want to. I enjoyed the book, so there's that. You can actually check out a review on our review section if you want to. But 2 free books that we know about. And again, other authors, if you have promotions that you want to do, that you want to talk about and get out word about, feel free to write to us. We're always happy to do it. Just remember, we record on Thursdays, so promotions that happen on Wednesdays and only Wednesdays or before that aren't as useful, aren't probably aren't being talked about as much. But like anything you have coming up for the weekends or even on Fridays or whatever, let us know about. We're happy to talk about them because it helps all LitRPG fans and readers get good deals and good free stuff. Okay, on to stuff that's out now. We have some stories that are out now. I haven't had a chance to read them. They just came out. That includes Save Point Reload. This is the second book in this sci-fi LitRPG series. Remember that this is the one where people are like transported to this strange alien world, and there's like weird competition. It's a little weird, I'll be honest with you, especially some of the monsters. But I personally really enjoyed it. So looking forward to reading book number 2 at some point. Also out right now is the second book in the Transformation series by Valery Zursky. This is a Russian translation, so be aware of that. Book number 1 was entertaining. Again, it's a translation, so not everything always translated well, but it was an entertaining book as well. The second book in the Illusionist series, which is a Viridian Gate Online expanding universe novel called Viridian Online Dead Man's Tale, is out. I liked book 1 tremendously. Also out is book 5 of the Stonehaven League series called Vault of the Magi by Carrie Summers. It's a fan favorite, so that is out as the 5th book. Collide Evoborn LitRPG Saga book number 2 is out. This one had a kind of a weird release schedule. Like book 1 came out, we gave a review, and then the pre-order for book number 2, and it kind of shifted a lot, and then it kind of disappeared, and it's finally out. So if you're a fan of that series, book 2 is actually out, even though I expected it to pop out at the end of February because that's what the pre-order said. But things change. This is from Matthew Kent. This is his second book that's actually out right now. Book 1 is going to be out for free on Friday and Saturday of this month, just the upcoming 29th and 30th of March. So book 2 is out as well. And on to new LitRPG audiobooks. Beta Life, Digital Sorcery, book number 1 is out as an audiobook. This was a very funny story. I think that's the thing about it. It had the best sense of humor. Not to everybody's cup of tea, though. It's very adultish humor, so just be aware of that. The Level Up book number 2 as an audiobook is out called The Hero. Definitely enjoyed that one. Carrie Summers' 3rd book in her Stonehaven League series is out as an audiobook as well called Caverns of Spirits, as is the 2nd book of the Bard Barleona series, The Song of Shadow. Remember, this is a kind of a spin-off series set in the same universe as Ways the Shaman. Vasily Mahenko does co-author it, but it is written by a different author and it has a different main character. There's some cameos from the original series, Sway the Shaman, but again, this is supposed to be completely separate-ish. So there you go. And it's actually going to be out on March 29th, which is tomorrow, which is when most people actually watch the podcast. So I figured I don't want you guys to miss something that's going to come out. And there you go. So on to upcoming LitRPG. This is where I read off the things I know that are coming out in the near future. Feel free to skip ahead, but again, there are some new additions to this list, so you can plan your reading schedule. A lot of readers actually really enjoy this section because they get to plan. Oh, I have to save up money this weekend because these books are coming out, and I know I do. On March the 29th, it'll be Shift, Book 1, Defender of Gallow Wind. On the 1st of April, it'll be Into the Game, Dungeon Crawl Quest, A Liberty Adventure, Wizard Warrior Quest. So that'll be out on the 1st. On April the 1st, it'll also be Dark Hand, Alpha World book number 7. So the 7th book in that series. Man, it's already 7 books. I can't believe it. On April the 5th, it'll be the 2nd book in the Jinn Chamber series called Rivals. On April the 10th, it'll be Edge of the Abyss, Respawn Trials book number 1. On April the 11th, the 2nd book in the Firebrand series, which is in another Viridian Gate Online Expanding Universe series called Embers of Rebellion. That one will be out on April the 11th. 5th book in the Gaga series, which is again one of my favorite series, called Dukes and Ladders. On April the 12th, Adapt, A Touch of Power book number 1. The first book is called Siphon. You might remember that name a little bit better. This is produced by Mountain Dale Press, the wonderful Jay Boyce. So looking forward to reading that one on April the 12th. That pre-order just went up. On April the 22nd, a Class A threat, Discardium, from the author of the Level Up series. April the 25th, In Search of Old Danes, Galacticon book number 2. May the 18th is going to be Guardians of the Roundtable book number 5. That series is still going, and there's some fans of it, so just be aware that the 5th book is coming out on May the 18th. Web of Worlds, Reality Benders book number 4. It's going to be out on May 20th. I wasn't sure we were going to get a 4th book, to be honest, but I'm happy to see that we are. On June the 1st, there'll be Realm of Noria. And the second book in the Discardium series is actually up for pre-order. It is set for June the 10th. So that author is definitely working super hard to get this series, and the publishers have enough trust in it that they already have 2 pre-orders up. So yay. Okay, and that's it. On to new releases and reviews. And in new releases and reviews, we're going to begin with a review for The Final Trial, Level Up book number 3, a literature series written by Dan Sugralinov. So Sugralinov. I literally wrote it down at some point, just so I wouldn't remember how to say it. It is 483 pages. It is $6.99. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Phil Panilonov's tribulations seem to have run their course. He's quite prepared to quit the alien game installed in his brain. In fact, Phil looks forward to a normal existence. Both he and his company are in excellent shape. Still, the timing seems to be badly wrong. Humanity's enemies are stronger than ever. Despite all his new abilities, Phil has never been so close to defeat. But there's too much at stake this time, his interface included. Without it, all his hopes for a better future will be thwarted. Phil can't afford that to happen. He has to face his enemies and defeat them, otherwise all his work has been for nothing. Can he really confront a force which is infinitely more powerful than he can ever hope to become? A force which will stop at nothing to achieve its ends. So there we go. Full disclosure, I received advance copy for review. I purchased the copy when it became available, so... and here's basically the review. This is a nice conclusion to the very first arc of the Level Up series. It resolves most of the big plot lines while leaving lots of room for future ones. And it really does a good job of like tying up everything. I don't want to spoil until like what exactly happens, because that's not nice. But be assured that, okay, most of the plot lines, I should say, from the first 2 books are fairly resolved by the end of this one. Phil, the main character, finally faces the big test that will determine if he can keep the life-changing interface the aliens installed. This test adds a new narrative that feels a little more like traditional LitRPG story, with a specific hex capture game that has to be won. So there's a competition element there. In that section, there's definitely lots of action, there's strategy, base building, player versus player combat. So really interesting builds for characters. And at the same time, the real world storyline, which I personally come to enjoy a lot, is not abandoned. It is lessened though, so be aware of that. That the narrative is basically broken between those 2 story plots. One of the real world story, and one of the testing game, hex capture, the territory kind of thing with lots of action. But in the real world, the real storyline still continues. The main character still gets to do all the other stuff you've seen him do in the past, very slice of life kind of stuff. But there is also a new villain that I thought was kind of neat in the real storyline. That was kind of nice. Several villainish stuff. Some very interesting things I have that I'm super pleased about personally. I was like, oh, that's fun. For me, though, the game testing stuff really does add a lot of action adventure. I think many readers are actually going to really enjoy. For me, though, I still like the real world storyline better. Like I really do. I think that's the secret sauce of this series, and that the real world storyline is unique. Not a lot of other stories just keep to that particular, and it's very hard to keep essentially you following some dude while he's doing stuff in the real world interesting, and yet the author really does a really good job in the first and all the books essentially. And I've always really appreciated that part of this particular series, and that has always been a really interesting and different way of telling a liberty story, and that it's everyday slice of life stuff. A guy who's essentially a loser gets an RPG interface, and what does he do with it, and how does he use it to become essentially a better person and to improve his life. And it was always super fascinating, always very realistic, never like super over the top, but eventually adding more and more like expanded elements of like coolness. And I thought it was always like a really unique way of like looking at LitRPG. Like, and it makes sense because that's this stuff that happens in the story and the world story is all the stuff that I'm like, oh, I would probably do that too. I wouldn't become a superhero because I just have an RPG interface, but I could do all these other really cool things socially and constructually and, all the fun stuff in the series. Is always like a real interesting speculative journey, So for me, really fun stuff. Again, I always like the real storyline, but again, I think for most readers, the added action adventure from the game testing hex capture base building stuff is going to be probably more appealing to the general reader. Like I know I'm weird in that I like the real life slice of life story a little more, but I think this is actually going to be appealing to a lot more readers, just because of that aspect of it, which is going to be a little more familiar. Overall, a good story. I actually read this thing in one sitting, and I stayed up really late in the morning to do so. It was really that enjoyable. So for me, it gets a score of 7.7 out of 10. That's the final trial, level up book number 3, score of 7.7 out of 10. There you go. Okay, on to our next review, which is going to be the Lost Portals, the Czarzakian Multiverse Online, LitRPG Omniverse, book number 1, written by Bruce X. Brown. Okay, this one is 245 pages, 99 cents. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. It is: 7 Game Master Corpsmen went into a coma after exploring a glitch in the simulated multiverse. It's classified by the GMC until they can figure out what's going on with the anomaly. They call the phenomenon a lost portal. Newly commissioned Game Master Priest McKenna makes a mistake of leading his team into a lost portal. Priest and his wife are the only 2 corpsmen to return from the portal and not go into a coma, but the event changed their lives. They lost their team, their memories of what happened inside the portal, and they lost their marriage. Priest also loses his class and his powers. The Game Master Corps question his ability as a leader. His ex-wife becomes a dangerous rival. Now Priest must create a new team of the Multiverse Explorers to get his powers back and find the lost portal while his friends are trapped. He recruits a timid portal mage, an intern developer, and others. The only way to succeed is to journey deeper into the Czarzakian multiverse and level up. Can the team grow in skill and ability to even survive exploring the multiverse? Can they find the lost portal and save the people stuck inside? What is the source of these anomalous portals with no destination? And that is the novel description, folks. And I'll be honest, that description is fairly accurate, but it also describes some of the issues I had with the story. Okay, now full disclosure, I received advance copy for review. I purchased a copy when it became available. I know I say that sometimes. All essentially means is that authors give me advance copies because they would like a review that's ready by the time they release. I always purchase copies of these novels just so there's no perception of getting things for free in exchange for positive or negative reviews, because sometimes they're very negative, and that's the truth. They're always honest though. Okay, this novel is kind of a mixed bag, and I'm a little conflicted about it. I did not like the beginning, and part of that is addressed in the novel description, in that it's not clear what this is. It's not actually really clear in the first portion of the story if this is actually LitRPG at all. It is. It turns out to be. It really does. But that portion of the story isn't really LitRPG-ish until you're almost a third of the way through, and I'll get to that in a second. But the first portion of the story, again, is a little confusing. If you read that novel description and you're like, what's the plot? What's up with these multiverse things? What's up with this portal stuff? Is this a VR game? Is this transported to a game world? All that is not super clear, and it's a little confusing. And that's one of the things that I did that I had trouble, that made it hard for me to connect and enjoy the story, the beginning especially. It definitely feels like the author was writing something, and he was just kind of stream of conscious, writing a thing, and it's not terribly written or anything. It's just it doesn't feel like there's just an exact purpose. The author knows where he's going within that first section. So it's confusing for me as a reader when I'm reading this, and I'm essentially reading this weird, gory description of a chase and these portals and these undefined characters and this lost portal thing happening. In addition to this heavy info dump about, this is a multiverse universe where people are playing a VR game, but they're also exploring alternate dimensions. And I'm like, okay. And there's also throwing out game terms which have no real context. And I'm like, huh? Like I said, so the first portion really was just not favorable to me, at least especially that first 7-ish, 8%-ish. And again, up to the 30% mark, The story really doesn't feel like LitRPG. It feels more like a sci-fi multi-dimensional story with some gaming jokes or some gaming references. Like, there were definitely words that are thrown in there about, like, oh, people have classes and they have special abilities and they level, and things like that. That stuff is mentioned, but it's not really shown as like any kind of RPG progression until the 31% mark. And I won't spoil how that happens, but it's about that point where, like, oh, you actually see the main character regaining his class powers, and much of the rest of the story is just him training his new team members. And again, this is not spoilery, it's in the novel description. Newly empowered NPCs who are getting their own classes, and it's very much like a level, slice of life, level of experience. They go on adventures, they train, they learn their powers, and that's all there. And that section is not boring. It isn't. I liked it better than the first part of the story. The little adventures they go on are kind of range from like okay to good, but here's the issue: like, this whole middle section of the story is like super skippable. It's very slice of life, meaning that you just kind of follow the characters as they do some stuff. But I found it to be very skippable by the end of the story. I was like, oh, this isn't horribly written. This is like okay-ish. But when I was looking through the story as a whole, I was like, oh, you can kind of read up in the first 7%, skip everything in the middle, jump to the 95% where there's like a resolution of stuff, and you're honestly not missing it. Like, it's the exact same resolution to the story. And I'm like, oh, that's unfortunate. It means the middle is kind of just, it feels a little fluffy. So like, none of this, basically told me like, oh, none of that middle section is really matters to the plot. If I can skip it and it's literally a more concisely told story and it makes a little more sense, and you get the same resolution and feeling like, oh, okay, there you go. That is what it is. The end is actually pretty good. I actually enjoyed the ending quite a bit. It has a good twist, good resolution of the big plot lines, and some really kind of touching moments there actually at the end. Overall, again, while I like the end of the story and the Samantha Gina plotline, which are characters in the story, you'll read about them or not, it kind of wasn't enough to make up for the so-so slice of life middle that didn't really matter, and the beginning that I actively did not like. So the story for me is score 6 out of 10. That just means that this didn't work for me. Other people might enjoy it for other reasons. But for me, for the reasons I'll list about, it just didn't work. It's not necessarily a badly written story, not even boring. Boring would be 5. It just didn't work. It just wasn't good for me, which would be a 7 out of 10. So for me, this is gets a 6 out of 10. Again, that's a Lost Portals, the Czarzakian Multiverse Online, LitRPG Omniverse book number 1, with a score of 6 out of 10. There we go. Okay. Wrong button. Hey, but you got music twice, so that's good. So the next review is going to be Gunblade, Crystal Shards Online, book number 4, written by Rick Scott. And it is 527 pages, $5.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. In the future, only the strong survive. New London, a city of wondrous technology where cyborgs and androids reign, the fate of many is decided by bloody PvP. But this violent metropolis may also hold the secret to the true locations of Citadel, and Reese and his friends are running out of time to save their homes. With Gilly and Becky now safe from the labyrinth, Reese turns his attention to the original mission of saving Citadel. But in order to discover it, they'll need to leave the fantasy realm of NASCAR and cross the wild to explore a harsh and futuristic dystopia, in hopes of accessing the archives that will lead them to their homes. But as they face powerful enemies, a bloodthirsty AI, and challenges like never before, a dark secret from Rembrandt's past may threaten to bring it all undone. But before even that, Reese will need to face his own demons from the past, an arch nemesis who stands in his way. And the rest is just like, join and read, so I'll skip that. This is a short review. I enjoyed the book. It really was entertaining. This is another action-packed entry into the series. This time the group is traveling to a new zone, as described by that wonderfully, very, very pretty cover art. A new zone called New London. There are different rules here. There are different classes. There are different enemies to fight. And I think the change of setting, it really does help spice up the story a little bit. It kind of leaves the fantasy setting, the straight fantasy setting, and it goes into something a little more cyberpunk. Like, you see motorcycles, you see guns, you get more players in this new area. So there's player versus player faction fighting. There's literally a tournament and some other great, interesting action adventure stuff. And I think the switch from fantasy to include guns and cyberpunk setting is a nice little shift. But again, you still get in the same progression of the main plotline is an advanced a ton. But, you get a lot of good action and stuff in the middle. So score of 7.5 out of 10 for me. A good, solid read. And again, if you're a fan of the series, you're going to enjoy this. So Gunblade, Crystal Shards Online, score of 7.5 out of 10. Easy. Excuse me. Okay. Next review, Bone Dungeon, Elemental Dungeon number 1, a Dungeon Core LitRPG, written by Jonathan Smith, produced by Portal Books. It is 398 pages, $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. Ryan doesn't remember much about his life before becoming a dungeon core, only that he had a bit of a disagreement with the church, something to do with a beheading. Now reborn, Ryan begins to arm his darkness dungeon with devious traps, bestial zombies, and ill-named skeletal creations, all without doing anything too evil. Well, mostly. Some adventurers just deserve a stalactite to the head. But Ryan quickly learns being a darkness dungeon isn't all loot and bone puns. With the necromancer on the rise and the adventure guild watching his every move, he must prove that not all darkness dungeons are malevolent, even if they do have a few skeletons in their caverns. Sadly, all these issues keep distracting him from his own guilty pleasure, Skeletal Fight Club. But don't tell us fairy about it. So there we go. A very humorous novel description. Actually does a really good job of describing the sense of humor and the banter that's in the story. This is a good, if predictable, dungeon core story for me. There's a good snarky sense of humor and a few interesting aspects. But overall, the story is kind of middle of the road for a dungeon core novel. Nothing bad. Good adventure, limited monster types, a dungeon and a bonded fairy create mobs, traps, and treasure for adventurers. Which I feel is like pretty standard. The only slight variation would be that the dungeon creates undead monster types. Still, it's an entertaining story, it is, but it doesn't really do anything to push the dungeon core genre. And for me, that's kind of why I didn't enjoy it as much. It gets a score of 7.2 out of 10, which is on the lower end of good for me. And the only reason it gets that is not just is because, again, I feel like when I was reading the story, I was like, oh, I've read all these elements other places before. And it feels almost like the author did a really good job of researching the dungeon core genre and saw the common elements. Like, oh, we have to have a dungeon core, let's make a crystal. And you have to have a fairy, and they have to like make traps and spawn monsters, and adventurers come in, and there's supposed to be good banty humor, and all that's done very accurately, and it's done well. It's enjoyable. It's a very good, fun story. But again, at the same time, like when I kept reading, I was like, oh, I've read this here before, and I've read this here before, and I've read this here before. And there's nothing really different that this particular novel does that expands the dungeon. Nothing that's different. It's like, oh, this is special and unique only to this story. I mean, there's probably like the monster card thing, but that's on kind of a side little special humorous thing. As far as the dungeon creation aspect or the dungeon trapping thing, yeah, I'm like, oh, okay, this is not bad. It's just like not super special. So I'm like, oh, 7.2 good score still. But again, it's not really pushing the genre into anything super new. Still, it's doing really nice on Amazon. So it's Dungeon Core, Elemental Dungeon, a Dungeon Core novel with a score of 7.2 out of 10. If you like Dungeon Core novels and stories, you're probably going to enjoy this. So there you go. Okay, next is Soulcatcher, LitRPG series universe ICS book number 1, written by Sergei Zetevskiv. That's what I'm going to say it is. It is 557 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here is the author's description. What happens when you suddenly find yourself in a reality of untold possibilities in a place where technology and magic are indistinguishable? Every game location is a transformed physical world connected to one another by an interstellar network of portals. Every player avatar is a living, physical body with incredible survival traits. Once in this dreamscape, it would be unwise to not seize the moment. There are, however, a couple of catches. First of all, you don't remember your identity. Second, the sandbox of this inter-civilization game universe ICS is a dangerous place for beginners. Finally, character restoration is finite. Death in ICS may be irreversible. So there we go. This is a Russian translation that focuses mostly on action adventure. The main character wakes up in a virtual world and is given a goal to beat the hardest dungeon and the baddest bosses in the starter zone all within 10 days. If he does, he'll get to keep his scaling starter item and have an advantage out in the world beyond. will he be sent automatically in 10 days anyways. But it's not a straightforward path. He'll have to deal with competing builds, PvP assassins, a variety of link quests, and many monsters. Also, there are mysteries in the story to be solved, like why he doesn't have memories for the game, and also who is trying to permadeath kill him. So some interesting stuff there. Overall, the combat in the story is probably going to be the most appealing aspect. There's actually a really nice variety of monsters and quest types, stuff from straightforward dungeon crawling to actually like defense quests, the like tower defense-ish, and player versus player combat. And there's like a real, like a genuine, like a surprising variety of monsters with like really detailed abilities, and all the game stuff is really detailed. There are a few sections where it's like really info dumpy that even I was like, oh, this probably goes on too much, but those are rare, like the things that get boring. Overall, it's an entertaining story. However, because of the amnesia aspect of the story, some readers have noted, and I kind of feel this way too, that it's hard to connect to the characters, and that's just because they don't have backstory, and their personalities aren't rooted in anything like, oh, when I was a kid, this happened to me, and like it was a traumatic experience, or my goals are this because of, whatever, because they literally don't remember anything. And so that amnesia aspect really made it hard to connect to characters that don't have any kind of personality or backstory, for me at least, and for some other readers I know as well. So for me, I had a good time with it. Again, there are some sections that have issues, maybe because of translation, or maybe just because of cultural context, I guess. For me, it gets score 7.3 out of 10. Had a good time with it. That's Soulcatcher, LitRPG series, Universe ICS, book number 1. Has a few issues, obviously, but overall, entertaining story. 7.3 out of 10. Okay, next review and last one. See, not that long. Not that long of an episode. It is Greyblood, Adventurer Academy, a LitRPG series written by Daniel Prince. It is 358 pages. It is $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. And here's the author's description. Born a monster, destined to be a hero. Lugo is a half-orc, and in his world, that's a very dangerous thing to be. He dreams of becoming an adventurer, slaying monsters and delving into dungeons. Unfortunately for him, one cut to his skin could reveal his secret. He's forced to spend his days in his small village, working at the smithy and keeping his head down. But when his world is turned upside down in a monster attack on his village, Lugor seeks training at the Adventurer Academy, where he can learn to become a champion that he was born to be. It won't be easy, especially whilst contending against an arrogant mage who is determined to see him fail. With a steadfast dwarven elementalist and a sarcastic dark elf necromancer by his side, Lugor sets out to prove that just because he's a half-orc doesn't mean he can't be a hero. There we go. This is actually a really easy review. It's a pretty good LitRPG story that has magical academy, coming of age themes, good action, really nice digital crafting that actually matters to the story. Tournaments, and while there's a few technical errors, like some writing flaws related to like some of the notifications or like small spelling errors or misused words here and there, and some late story plot holes. There's nothing here that really ruins the story. Overall, it's a fun journey with likable characters, action adventure, nicely detailed crafting, and I had a good time with it. Not really much else. I mean, without spoiling things. Gets a score of 7.5 out of 10. It's been really enjoyable for most readers. It's done pretty good on the Amazon charts as well. So it's Greyblood Adventurer Academy, a LitRPG series, and of course, big congratulations to Daniel Prince for doing so well in his first novel. Congrats, man. And that's it. That's actually the show. That's the whole thing. Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for listening, for following, for watching the podcast. If you want to follow us on any shape or form, we have places you can follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, on our webpage. We'll have links in the show notes for all those places. If you want to come check us out, get the latest and greatest reviews as they're being done on a weekly basis. And of course, a bunch of other groups where authors, LitRPG authors, and fans gather and talk and chat about this genre that we love. And of course, you want to support the podcast in any way, shape, or form, you can find all the ways you do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support. Until then, folks, thank you very much again for hanging out with me today, listening to me talk about LitRPG, this genre that I love and have a passion for, that I spend my entire weeks and days reading, writing, and reviewing and source and podcasting. Until we can hang out again, folks, though, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.